around in 2030s.
Good morning. Carol Travis asked that I hand out, and I think most of you have it now, that sheet. It's just a summary of the Myers-Briggs conversation we talked about last week. By show of hands, how many of you have had a chance to see any or all of the PBS Future of Work episodes? Super. That's that's good. Where's Don? Well done. You lit a spark. What I'd like to do to begin is just open the floor for comments about it. I think about the episodes, or the topic, or the implications of the topic. Those are all very perceptive comments.
What are we going to do?
Mary Jane?
What are we?
Hold on a second, please. Would you mind setting up one of those sheets?
Hurry up before I forget what I was going to say.
Just a second. You're going to be very patient with me now.
Okay, I'll be very patient with you there. What are we going to do with this fractured society that's coming up after this workforce changes? We've seen it.
You're not
Yes,
going
she is.
Well, maybe a little better.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Now, what are we going to do? We now have a society that's going forward that is so opposite from what we had. What can we do, us individually, our country, or the people that run the areas, the mayors, the towns? What can we do to change what's coming to our society?
When you say what's coming, Mary Jane, and you talk about fracture, is it between the haves and have-nots, those who have work or those who don't? What fracture, or is it the political fracture?
Well, political fracture is always a part of the lives of all of us in the United States now. But more importantly, I think it has to do with the fractures within communities. The communities are changing. So what happens?
Again, changing in the sense of those who have job opportunities and those who don't.
The people are leaving from the cities and are now traveling around to find jobs, and they can find them. Coolest thing I ever saw was that Amazon thing where they all pack into a trailer and go there, pull up, live there on site, get paid, and then they can go off to another one. Is that the kind of lives that the future holds for a majority of our people?
I think basically that is the topic. And an interesting comment, reflection, if I may, on that, when we talk about going from town to town looking for work, or seasonally moving around. How many of you remember or saw the movie, was it Nomadland?
Yes.
For those who didn't, it involves, what's her name, Frances McDermott?
No.
Yeah, that's it. That's what it is.
No, it's not McDermott.
Frances McDormand.
Dormant.
Close.
I just call her Frances. But she, in that particular movie, she's in not a camper. Didn't she equip a pickup truck with a camper bed? I can't remember what it was. But anyway, a mobile home kind of thing, whether it's on a pickup or a van you pull or whatever, and traveled around the country looking for work. And in the second episode, I think, of Future of Work, the PBS thing, remember the man in LaGrange, Oregon, who had moved and periodically moved to one town after another, setting up camp to work. And in that case, he was working as the manager of the mobile home camp. My thought when I first heard you say that was of the itinerant workers who came to pick potatoes or thin sugar beets on our farm in the 50s and 60s. And literally, as migrant workers do all the time, they follow the crops and the seasons. They never really have a long-term permanent home. Their children, I remember remotely the children of the workers coming to grade school, but I don't remember anything after that. I think it stopped with a couple of the earlier grades. And that was more to deal with taking care of them. So the question really, are we as a society moving toward a very large swath of people that have never been migrant workers becoming migrant workers? Is that the future of work?
Well, one thing about that movie and Frances, she had an opportunity to live with, I'm not sure if it was her sister or friends, but she decided.
She chose the life.
She chose the life of the nomad. I don't know that that's the way things are expected to be in the future.
Don?
Come on, get over here. What are you?
This is my job for the future.
The basic problem is that the society, our economic society, is changing. It has changed. We're in the process of changing. Like it said in the program, back in the 50s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, the middle class represented about 37% of the total population. Today it's down to 23%. It's disappearing. Those people that were up at the Capitol on January 6th and will be there again tomorrow are those kinds of people. They're not impoverished. They're middle class people who are scared to death of what's going on around them. And there's the picture that what used to be a career is now just a job, because it can change and does change, can change very rapidly. So this insecurity is being built into our society, and how do you deal with that? And can the government deal with it? Partially so, I think. But private enterprise also has to deal with it. And even in government, that has to be done at several different levels, the local level as well as the national level. So it's quite a big problem. It's not going to be overcome overnight, but it's on top of this, and it's going to get worse.
Sue?
Sue.
South Star, microphone behind you.
I don't know if I can talk loud or not.
Here, no, yes you can.
Hello. We have to be very careful who we elect. We need to find people who are looking to the future and not those who would be very happy to relive the past. Or it's going to get away from us.
That's true.
Well, that's a good point, because if we think in terms of just what is happening today, I understand there's 9 to 10 million jobs that are open, number one. And if any of you watch Shark Tank, innovation is going on all the time in the country for improvements. So if you just think today, if that's the kind of politicians we get, it may not be helpful for the longer term as things change with robots and working from home, etc. I didn't conclude anything. I'm just saying today the economy doesn't seem that bad today. It's what's going to happen in the future.
Well, it depends upon, where you stand is where you sit, or something like that, where you sit, where you stand. One of the things that you said, and I think it is worth digging deeper on, is that just mentioning the fact that there are 9 or 10 million jobs unfilled today, and we're at 5.3% unemployment, and if you multiply that times the workforce, that's probably twice as many available workers as there are available jobs. Why are they not taking those jobs? We had a conversation last night, Kirk Clarkson and I, a little bit at dinner, or the whole table. One of the things that's, for some of us who've been very supportive of an active government intervention, the idea of providing what we've come to know as COVID relief at a time when businesses are closed down. And that COVID relief took the form of child payments plus just checks. And it ended September 1st, is that right? But during the period of COVID relief, to my great dismay, people said, I'd rather stay home and take my relief check than go to work. And when you think about 9 million unfilled jobs and 15 million unemployed workers, or whatever the number is, who are saying, for some reason, I'm happier staying home than I am going to work. What's causing that? And is that a characteristic of human nature, that there are a group of people who are just kind of lazy? And if so, is the proper government response to say, suffer, son of a gun, suffer? Yeah. Mary Jean?
Do I have to talk in that thing?
This recording, we're all being recorded for people who want to watch it later, so
My
that's why.
question is this: why do people work? Why did you work? To survive? To provide money for your family? Why do people work?
You know, and I think that's really fundamentally a good question, and it relates to some extent some of the things I've been trying to noodle through in part since last night. The world we grew up in, as a rule, everyone here, had this, you went to work because that's what you do. You know, you don't grow up and not work, you grow up and work. And when you do that, you earn enough money that you can live nicely, that your children have a better life than you. That used to be, all of us just assumed we're going to have a better life than our parents, not because they're bad and they're good. That's how it's done. And our children will have a better life than we have. And I was watching something about that the other day. That ended fairly recently. It was only about 15 years ago that statistically there was no chance that this generation would have as high or as an average income greater than their parents. So we lived to do that. We lived so that we could, at the end of our lives, have a good life, and we'd have, a pension, most of us in our work. Although I want to get the actual data on that and come back to pensions. And then we introduced Social Security for those who were missed on the pensions. We introduced Medicare so that we'd be taken care of. All of those things were a part of that's how life is. You go to school, you get a job, you get advanced, your children do better than you do, you retire reasonably, and are able to live out your life. What's changed that, or what is changing that? And there's that long list of future of work, AI, automation. I think clean energy has to be put on that list of massive displacement, if not elimination of jobs. Urban migration, the fact that people are moving from the farms to the cities or the rural towns to the cities, leaving behind less opportunity. All of those things have changed that basic, what you do. You go to work, you get a job, it's going to be better than children. But I think there's something else that's going on. Back here, I'm sorry.
I think it's welfare. When they introduced welfare, a lot of people who would have had to work stopped working. And there's a significant portion of the population that is perfectly happy to accept a monthly check and make ends meet the best they can rather than go to work.
I totally agree. Charlie?
All of the things that you mentioned pretty much going in the same direction. And we are heading to become a socialist country.
But I'll just go to socialist because our reaction to all of those things is to provide for them as a government.
What we are doing, all the things you mentioned, and each of them individually, not so much, but when you put it all together, we have a movement toward becoming a socialist country.
And again, try, does automation move us towards socialism?
I'm talking, well, I don't know if automation, I'm
Does
talking,
artificial intelligence move us towards socialism?
I'm talking about what the government is doing.
Okay, it's the response to those, that's my point, it's the response to that moves us more and more to socialism.
Yeah.
Although I'll go back to the comment back here of welfare and how welfare has traditionally been a disincentive to work, right?
I think it is. I think, if you look at the statistics, we've now got almost 50% of the people in this country are receiving welfare.
Including everyone in this room. All of us are getting Social Security and Medicare.
But that's not welfare.
Well, no, it's a form of government support.
But it's not welfare.
We'll come back to this very important point.
Okay, now, hang on.
Do you really think that people on welfare are happy? I'm not sure of that. I think they look around and see what everybody else has, and they would like to have some of that hope. So, I don't think welfare is that kind of problem. I think that's helpful for people that cannot get up by themselves.
My reaction to it is that and that. It seems to me there are people in the world, not just here, but everywhere, although it seems to be a concentration, I used to think it was a concentration in my county, who are just lazy. They just don't want to go to work. And if somebody gives them support not to go to work, they won't work. That dream, how you do it, what you do is you go to school, you get a job, your children are better. For some reason, they don't dream that dream. I don't think that's a very big slice of the population, number one. And number two, as my wife and I disagree on this all the time, she said we should drug test welfare recipients, and if they fail the test, let them starve. And I said, for the richest country in the world to see a lot of starving people on the side of the road, I don't know how that happens. I don't like them. I wish to hell they'd work, but I'm not altogether sure I want to watch them die.
They won't starve, they'll get a job.
And the theory that if they're addicted and therefore they don't pass the drug test, so they don't get welfare, they ain't gonna get a job. Do we let them die on the side of the road? And my instinct is to say none of us really would. We do something, even if it's put them in prison. Take away their drugs, put them in prison, feed them there. But, Mary Jane, did you have a comment?
I do. Sorry about that.
I know, it's interesting.
The reason, that's all right. The reason I asked that, why do we work? I brought up my children and all my family. We work because of a duty, a sense of duty to our family, a sense of duty to our country to make it better. That's why we work. Where is that philosophy in today's people? Have you passed it on? Did you pass it on?
And that brings Don.
I think that the concept of whether people want to work or not is somewhat irrelevant. The situation today is the jobs are disappearing. There was a little squib on television yesterday, I think it was, about one of the big supermarket chains is starting out with an experiment of a checkout-less store. You don't need checkout peoples anymore. Now that's a menial job, but it's a job. And if that disappears by a system that they set up, other people are going to be setting up these kinds of systems, and jobs are going to disappear. Any kind of job, to an extent. And the population is not decreasing, and it's getting older. And there's all sorts of elements in here where, contrary to Charlie's, the problem with socialism. government, somebody's got to take care of it,
Yeah.
and it's going to be the government. Because private enterprise, the churches and all those sort of things might do something, but to cover everybody, it's going to have to be the government. And how they do that, and the form they take, is it's there.
It's social.
It's called.
And it is socialism because it's the society taking care of the individual.
How do you define socialism?
Well, it's a collection, I'm not an expert politically on that, but being a socialist is dealing with life in a certain way in which one of the things is that I'm going to be taken care of. And if I'm taken care of, I have an obligation to those people who are taking care of me, which basically is the government. And it's a government that is changing. Whether we like it or not, I really believe we are heading left.
Yeah, I agree.
Gradually, we are heading more and more.
The most socialist.
Like this, if you take countries like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, they're being taken care of, cradle to the grave, and it's working. It's been working for a good many years now.
And they have low unemployment.
And they have low unemployment, and it's a way of that has evolved in these smaller countries. But they are, it's going. You're right. We're going that direction, and I don't know what other direction we can go, because the people will force it to the general population.
The dilemma I see, Don, though, goes back to this concept or this fact that Ken mentioned. 9 million jobs unfilled at a time when we have way more than that many number of people looking, theoretically looking for work. In a society where the increasing socialism, increasing government support in one form or another of people who lost their jobs to automation, artificial intelligence, change of technology, that number grows and grows and grows. And the only response to that is to somehow take care of them. But what happens when we provide that care and they still don't work? We still can't fill jobs. I've got an answer.
Well, some of those jobs are not fillable by those people. They don't have the skills to fill those. That doesn't mean all of that is true, but to a great extent it's true.
Those that didn't hear John, he's saying that many of those jobs are not fillable by the people who are unemployed. They don't have a skill set. John?
We haven't said a thing about education and school dropouts, and you're sort of skirting around that right now of why all these people who are unemployed don't take a job. Some of them can't get the job. Sometimes it's drug tests. Sometimes the job requires a high school education and they don't have it. I don't know what the statistics are on school dropouts, but I have seen enough evidence to think that this is increasing instead of decreasing.
I think that's true.
And I think that's a big problem. And you do see some well-educated people who are unemployed. I'm not saying that. But the odds are that these people who drop out of school in the 8th and 9th grade are never going to be much above this level. And that's a shame. And I think we need a lot more work on motivational research, and it needs to start back with the school dropout problem.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I think there's something else to know. Nancy?
I've been involved
Very.
I've been involved with the early learning program that Governor Bush started, and it's been very successful. And we're learning to educate children from probably poorer homes earlier and longer. And he started the program. I'm working with Governor DeSantis right now. It can happen. It takes all of us in the education area to make it work and work with the children. Starting early.
Very good. We're going to hear more about that next week, by the way, when Mary Marks is here. she's going to talk about the PACE program, which speaks directly to both the dropouts and to young women particularly who run afoul of either education requirements or the law. I think there's something else going on that's very important to acknowledge. We all think about welfare as the culprit, and we all remember the welfare mothers. We all remember during the Clinton years, really, when welfare to work became the new law, partly, and another part of it was we're going to remove the incentive for more children. If it were so that there was a private sector response to that old tradition, go to school, get a job, advance, and doing that, the grand bargain was you do that, and the system will take care of you. The system wasn't socialism, the system was private sector. What happened to that bargain? If you look at the data from about 1980 on, and that's a significant year for a variety of reasons, way last fall, some of you were here, we talked about the Powell memo. Do you all remember that discussion? The group was probably smaller then, we met in another room. It listed a number of things that could be done to ensure the dominance, and in that case it was of the Republican Party, but it could have been anyone. But it was business can do these things. Among them were, number one, let's eliminate pensions as they were known. Nobody is going to get a fixed number that increases by the number of years you work. People will be given the opportunity to contribute to a 401k program, an IRA program, and the company would contribute something as well. The concept of a fixed pension went away. Why? What was the benefit of that to the society? Certainly I know why it's benefits shareholders. What was the benefit to society? That's one. Two, healthcare programs in companies. And I'm saying this as a former employer. Healthcare programs changed. When I started work in the 70s, it was to me just obvious that what you do is you provide the finest health care you can to your employees, because that was a cheap way of giving them a raise. I do no copay. Everything you could possibly cover, we covered, because that attracted employees. It was a good thing to do. By 1990, maybe late 90s, I hired a top flight human resource guy who said, wait a minute, you don't have to do that. These people will all work for you without that benefit. And the unwritten, maybe the concept of private enterprise is if you don't have to pay it, don't pay it, because shareholder value will increase. And I don't know how many of you experienced any of that. Our generation lived in a different bargain, as it were, between the system and the individual. And that bargain was primarily a private enterprise bargain. And I think companies, and one of the reasons they did it, we talked last night a little bit at dinner about this, was the strength of the unions. For many of us here, probably had a problem with unions. As a dedicated believer in unions, I never employed a union worker in my career. And I look back on it now, and I frankly am embarrassed. You know, I said I would pay them more, I'd give them better benefits, but I'm not going to give them the right to negotiate with me about what I do. Unions caused those pensions, those health plans, and wages to be this high. Part of my response, Ken, to the 9 million unfilled jobs is that those jobs are pretty crappy jobs. You know, the pay is low, there are virtually no benefits. The employers do their utmost to keep your hours below the magic. Is it 40 that certain restrictions kick in? Even here, we were talking to some of the higher paid staff, and they said nobody gets more than a 38-hour week, because to get more than that pushes you into a different category. if that's what the jobs are in response to the future of work, AI, and this growing number of people who don't have jobs, and the only jobs left over are basically, certainly not livable. On 30 hours and $15 an hour working, do the math. You can't support a family and have your children taken care of. Charlie, how do we respond to that other than an increase in the government intervention? And I'm open to ideas.
There's nothing wrong with an increase in the government. The government does have to provide for the underprivileged or the people who are really in desperate straits. I agree. I mean, what you said before, we're not going to let people die on the streets. The problem, I don't want it to become a financial issue, but it does. Every year we have a bigger deficit year after year. Our national debt is 30 trillion or so. And what happens is we build in, the politicians build in a program. That program never goes away. It's there forever. And that builds up all these costs in the budget that probably could be dropped or reduced so that the money can be used for other things like subsistence for the needy. And this is something that's just not addressed. And it's the same thing on the corporate side. The corporate side can do something more to help the underprivileged. And maybe it's a matter, the stock market lives and dies by earnings per share, EPS. And perhaps there's something about that there's got to be another benchmark that can build in some personal, they talk about personal infrastructure today or human infrastructure. Maybe some of the corporations can do some of that if we can adjust the EPS to mean something different.
We talked a long time ago, we being a group of people at Georgetown University, and I was on the board there, about a 4-part metric for corporate success. And we said it's stakeholders, not shareholders. It's shareholders for sure, employees, the community, and the planet. Those were the things we said. And we should somehow reward corporations who do good things for their employees, the communities where their plants are located, and the planet. Dead in the water. And by the way, that was probably in 97, 98, and I've been in about 5 of those kind of discussions, and they're all wonderful, and we all think what a great idea. And then you go back and say, how am I going to raise money? EPS. Full stop. EPS goes down, my stock price goes down, I'm a bad guy. Don?
If you talk about unions, I have a bachelor's and master's degree in labor relations and spent the first 13 years of my business career dealing with labor unions. And the labor union movement, beginning in the 30s until at least 1970, they created the middle class.
Yeah.
They did. Without labor unions, you would not have a middle class today. Now, in those days, as I recall, was somewhere in the neighborhood of 47% of the total non-governmental workforce was unionized. That means everybody, presidents, vice presidents, salesmen, 47% of the total labor force, non-governmental was unionized. Governmental was somewhere in the 10 to 15% range. Today, it's 7% of the the non-governmental workforce is unionized. And of course, in government, it's close to 95%. But that base has disappeared. The social element of the union movement that made things happen, it wouldn't have happened otherwise. Yeah. And so now we sit with a situation where that is not here. So what is going to take its place? Because you've got the lower class, if you want to call it that, those jobs are disappearing also. And And they don't pay it, and most of them don't pay enough, as Bob said, that you can live on. So what is the alternative for these people in the middle class who are going to be marching tomorrow, in Washington again? What are they going to do with their lives? You don't have a career anymore, you have a job. And the job changes, and you can have training for this particular job, that's fine, but then that job goes away, the next job needs nothing more training. And if you're starting with the grade school and the school children, maybe you can do something in that regard. But if somebody's already 45, 50 years old, training, retraining is not part of the ballpark, the ball game, in my opinion.
Charlie first, and Nancy.
You know, there's one constant that we have that will never go away. It will change from time to time. What I'm talking about is power. The ability to make things happen because of what you want. And power changes. It's a constant. There's always going to be somebody filling that role. Whether it is in a communist country, capitalist, socialist, it is there. And that determines the direction in which the rest of us move, if we so choose to accept that. We can change it. We change it through elections. We change it through government intervention. Whatever it is, whoever's got the power, and it is a human want to be filled, will have a large determination on what happens to the rest of the country or world.
You're walking back to Nancy. One of the things that frustrates me most about the present environment, which is basically a 50-50 population, 50-50 Congress, I don't think anybody has power in that ability to stop things. The power is gone. Yeah, you can get judges, and that's determinative of some really serious things, but you can't make massive changes. Not in a 50-50 deadlocked country. Frustrating to me. Nancy?
What happened to trade schools where people could learn skills to get a better job? Trade schools just sort of gone by the wayside now.
How many of you know what's in the so-called $3.5 trillion soft infrastructure program?
Is it there?
Absolutely. And when it's two things, it goes back to what John said too. It's preschool for everybody, 2 years of college for everybody. And those 2 years are in community colleges, junior colleges, or college, other universities, but specifically targeting trade and community colleges. And I think it's absolutely time. It ought to be. Those countries that, and is it socialism? Yeah. It's a collective response to an individual problem. And socialism isn't the same thing as Marxism or Nazism or communism. It's a society, social, taking care of the individuals. I think we need to strengthen the private sector, and I think one way to do it is to be more aggressive in unions, but not against them. Even this year, so-called right-to-work laws are being passed in states, and right-to-work laws, a stop union law. It's amazing to me when the workforce, as Don said, is only 7% unionized, that state legislators waste their time doing right to work. For God's sakes, they won that. It's over.
I think we need to promote success in the schools more, because children that feel successful move forward.
I couldn't agree more. And again, I look forward to what Mary Marks is going to talk about next week on that, what the PACE project is. I think emphasis on education is important. I'm going to go back a little bit to the private sector job. When you look at some of the jobs that are going unfilled, just talk to, I don't know, is it Barbara that runs the dining room?
Yes.
Talk to her about why she can't hire certain people. Here, we require drug tests, right? And for those of you who know much about the restaurant business, it's not exactly a drug-free zone back there in the kitchen. And that's been the case for a long time, and it doesn't make those people evil. That's just what the workforce is. The minute you say drug test, that eliminates a large swath of potential employees. Then you say, here's our wage. It's a minimum wage, which is, what is the minimum wage this year in Florida? Does anybody know?
About $8.25. $8.
$8.25. I think we're moving to 15 by 2023 or something, but I don't hold me to that. But it's 7 or 8, call it 8.5, okay? Do the work, do the math. 8.5 times 40 hours times 50 weeks, and then raise your family. Take care of you. Send your kids to some kind of decent daycare. It doesn't work. So why would anybody take that job that Barbara's offering in our kitchen at that price? And my response to that is, for heaven's sakes, increase the wages at the bottom. We are the most profitable society ever. Corporations are making more money than ever. EPS is the guiding force. We wouldn't have stock market records year after year if the earnings weren't also there. And those earnings are not going to be damaged very much by increasing the bottom floor. Just enough to get it to living. To me, Then again, what do I know?
There's another thing going on, I think, and it's a bias or a prejudice that we rarely discuss, which is ageism. I was talking to a good friend recently whose husband was let go during the COVID crisis. He was dismissed from his job that he'd had for many years, and it was an opportunity for that company. It's a very profitable business, but it was an opportunity to sort of clear off older dead wood and try to appeal when they, in anticipation of coming back after COVID, try to appeal to younger employees. That way they might not have to pay a pension, and they certainly wouldn't have to pay, any kind of hospitalization and so forth and so on. So there's a group out there, say in the 50 to 60-year-old range, maybe a little higher, 55 to 65, that group who are still willing to work and who would like to have another job or whatever, and they're not being hired in interviews because they've aged out. And what's happened in these companies is that people have learned to work from home, a lot of young people, and they prefer that. And they're not even having the overhead of their offices. They're not having to buy microwaves for a little kitchen so the employees can have something to eat. I mean, it's all changed. When I looked at the first session of the first part of the movie that Don recommended, which I highly recommend to everybody in this room, watching the robots flip hamburgers, one of the comments that was made, these robots come down and flip the hamburger. They do it beautifully. They never drop a hamburger, which I'm sure a human might. And the fact is that it was frightening to me to think that even the lower working class people in our country, which includes a lot of immigrants, because immigrants are often the only ones who want to do that kind of work, or willing to do that kind of work. But it pointed out that this is a job that will be taken over by robots because there are so many who don't want to do that kind of work. So I think, the whole thing is a huge problem, and I think we shouldn't forget about the whole idea of ageism.
And that's, we're aging as a population. It's every year it creeps up months by month of the average age. But theoretically, we could all work. I don't know about that. I don't know about Don flipping my hamburger, but how do you all feel about the idea of the universal basic income? Everybody in the world getting a check from the government. Everybody in our country getting a check from the government.
Not everybody.
It's not going to satisfy.
Okay, then not everybody. Let's income adjusted. I don't want to give Jeff Bezos the check, but income adjusted, universal basic. It's the Andy Yang was the proponent of that when he was running for president.
Minimum income.
Yeah, minimum income.
Yeah, that's going to
It's
happen.
kind of like I feel about billionaires getting Social Security.
Well, Sue's comment was, how incredible is it that these billionaires are getting Social Security checks? And probably check to make sure it's the right amount, too. I go to a minimum income, and I know a lot of people struggle with that idea. It goes back to welfare.
That's just an extension of welfare.
Now, why is anybody going to work if they get income, a guaranteed floor income from the government? And I don't have a good answer to that. But I don't have a good answer to the let them starve thing either. Those communities that are left behind, whether it's in the hollows of West Virginia, where I know that several of those little communities, those people are not going to take a job training and get a different job and leave. Maybe they should, I don't know, but they're not going to do it.
You know what's interesting, in Pennsylvania, up in the coal country,
Yeah.
people up there are like 5th generation welfare families that they were coal miners. They haven't had coal in 5 generations. They're still on welfare. They've never adjusted to the fact that they need to get different jobs and or move from that region. That's the problem.
I couldn't agree more. And 5 generations is a long time to say I'm stuck in my community. But again, I go back, and that problem in those little towns in Pennsylvania is written large all over the country. People move to the cities for a lot of reasons, and they leave behind towns that are not served.
But I think you also take the study of Youngstown and what they've done in Youngstown, Ohio, which went to nothing after they did the steel mills. They have now built themselves back up. So it can be done at the local level if you get the right type of people behind it and give the enthusiasm. And so the people don't have to move. There are jobs there, and they're pretty much forced to do them. And you can make it very embarrassing for people not to work.
My only response to that, I saw that, I loved it, and I love the whole story of Youngstown. But Youngstown is a big town compared to Del Barton and Kermit and the other hollow towns throughout West Virginia and Kentucky. It's coal country. And by the way, it's true in Bingham County, Idaho. Nobody wants to live in Blackfoot anymore. Doctors, lawyers. Why in the world would they come to a town of 5,000 people when they can go to a bigger city and have an income? And that means those people, they should move, right? They should move. They're not going to.
People don't move even if they live by the river. We talked about this last night, and their houses have been flooded 5 times. They don't move. So, one thing that seems to me is missing in this country today is motivation and inspiration. I've talked about inspiration before. I don't necessarily mean religious inspiration. So perhaps the better word is motivation, and perhaps that needs to come from private sector, as well as government, of course. But just to give a blank check to everybody because they exist doesn't seem to involve any motivation. So why not a check that is a reward for finishing school or finishing some sort of public service like the Peace Corps, something that we can engage young people in as a country and bring back love of country and duty.
We talk about the requirement that people work in order to get their welfare check. That didn't work, but levels of support, levels of government support based on achieving certain standards like education or whatever else, public service done. I like that.
I think that a program of mandatory government service for young people coming up, whether it be the military or something else. I had 2 of my grandchildren who worked in Teach America for 2 years. But there are things out there that could be done, could be productive for these young people to do it, and in fact make them do it.
I couldn't agree more. And mandatory service, a couple of years. Well, listen, we used up most of the hour, and I'm happy. Carol Travis sent the summary report out. I hope one of you will write the summary report of this discussion that we did solve the problem. that we've got this managed. It's a tough issue, and it's a tough issue that's only going to grow. It's not going to get easier anytime soon for all those reasons that the future of work is changing. And, you know, part of me says, let's look at socialism where it exists today. The Scandinavian countries are a good example. And try to take the best things they're doing and model those. Because some of the things they're doing seem to be working. They don't have any higher level of the lazy recipients than we have. Something's working. Let's try to benefit from that. Any final comments? Next week is going to be fun. It's going to be good. It's Mary Marks. It's pace. Come prepared to be inspired. Thank you.